Good morning, everyone. Aloha. This is Jason Schwartz. What seemed like maybe a technical problem we'll correct, but we got the most important part. We're here with a neutral zone. It's Monday, May 20th, 2019. God, it's crazy saying that. I have a guest that many of you know well. Beau Hawkes, welcome to our show.
Thank you, Jason. Thanks for having me.
You know, we were both children. God, was it how many years ago now? 1, 2 elections. That's 6 years ago, 12 years ago. When did we meet? A while ago.
It was about 5 years ago, I think.
You were running for mayor.
Yeah.
And you ran twice?
Yeah, ran in 2014 and also 2018.
Gotcha. 2014 and 2018, that sounds like history to me. But when you look at the long history of Maui, and I guess it wasn't that long ago, Beau is a champion. He is I'm going to just give you a little background check here. Many of you know him. He was famous because he stood up for his rights, and that was a very forward thing. Before it was fashionable, you were out there standing up for you felt was your truth and your freedoms. Thank you for that, for all of us.
You're welcome. It was a little unnerving when I first started walking this path, when I started actually walking the talk. It was unnerving, but I looked to guidance outside of myself to navigate, even to this day. This my political activism, my standing up for rights, it isn't just me or my want or desire. It's actually cumbersome and an impedance on the simplicity for my life. It makes my life more complicated. But it's not just my life I'm living, and what I mean by that is that I am walking in the shoes of not only my blood ancestors, but also I'm walking in the shoes of all those human beings that have come before us. And in recent history, we have names like Martin Luther King and John F. Kennedy who stood up and fought the oppressive force. And when I get down and when my energy levels are low, I remind myself of what they would do in 2019. What would Gandhi do if he had the internet? What would Jesus do if he had the internet? And so those are some of the questions I ask myself, and it kind of puts some wind in my sail and keeps me going, because it's lonely at times and confusing at times, but I have something deep inside of me that speaks to me, that says I will not sit silent and allow unjust action and behavior to continue without bringing awareness to it.
Well, that's really the best part. You stand up for what you feel is important and true, and you don't shy away because it may not be easy. So that's very, very much to be commended. Thank you. You know, yeah. I sort of think I do it in my own kind of way. I try to bring up issues and talk about things that may not always be comfortable, and try to do it like you do, in a very, quote, civilized way. You like to talk out issues, you know, and you come from a very good place. You know, I like talking to you because even if we didn't agree, you would be here arguing your point calmly, where so many, I guess I want to say from the president on down, like to, you know, throw spears in a way that's not necessarily productive. Any issues going on now that are specifically on your radar?
There are a number of issues, Jason. If I could give a blanket issue, it would be the system, the full system, the whole system itself is the issue. And
the American way, or you're talking finances,
it's
social?
It's beyond the terminology of so-called American. It's American has kind of turned into or evolved into what started out as Western. right? And we're certainly in the United States of America, which we are not here in Hawaii, part of the United States of America, although we're illegally occupied. The United States does set the trend, so to speak, as far as political and societal norms. And that comes by way of the mainstream media. And the media has, for many, many decades now, given the people certain information. Now, they tell the people that they are bringing the truth, but it is only a portion of the truth. And this is evidence of the truth being used to tell a lie. So we have the mainstream media using the truth to tell lies.
I'm going to give you an example. You'll probably say, yeah, like that. The Maui News had an article early in May about, we had a guest here, Rob Parsons, who was an environmental guy in the county, and his wife, Heather, Nirja is her spiritual name, was helping people in end-of-life circumstances, people that were choosing, either had some illness and were going to die, or had something and just didn't like the quality of life. Anyway, in that whole surreal,
okay, it's
called, there's a guy on the island we all know, he has a show here named Bodhi. Do you know Bodhi B?
Yeah, of course.
The death store,
right.
Conscious, different thing around death.
I appreciate that, absolutely.
Well, Heather was, and still is, a doula. And doula means server. There's birth doulas, there's death doulas. It's nothing new. In fact, I had a friend in Philadelphia that worked with the dead and, not the dead and dying, the dying in the East Coast in Philadelphia, and I introduced him to Bodhi here, and he came out for the first heavy training they did on this some 6 years ago. Anyway, the Maui News did a story about a gal named Faye Block who passed away and really wasn't that close with her children at all, and they weren't being supportive. And somehow in the process of everything, Faye turned over certain assets to Heather as part of pay or whatever, to also be discovered. But the Maui News and the writer gripped onto what an attorney in Honolulu, prosecuting, right, wanted to say, and what the accusations were, but really didn't give substance and form to the other side. So, like you say, true, there was this lawsuit, but that's not where the story should end. But the media sometimes, maybe for sensationalism, for whatever we want to say. That's why I wonder, where does real news and fake news, what does that mean? If you and I do a story here, is that fake news or is that real news? Well, how do we know what's real in this day of internet and all the, we can all create television shows, we can all put things up there, but how do we look through it? How do we change that media thing, or at least be able to recognize the difference?
It's a great question, Jason, and you're hitting on a nerve for me. And I'd like to elaborate, if
Please.
I could. And I want to preface it by saying that in my speaking, in my talking, I tend to sometimes talk in a roundabout way. In other words, you ask me a question, I hear the question in terms of, hey, what's the solution? And so in order for me to look for a solution, I must change my perspective. I must look at it from different perspectives, and so that has a roundabout type tendency. And so I just wanted to let you know that before I get into how do we, really what we're looking for is how do we discern real news from fake news?
Yeah.
And if we can use the term truth versus non-true in place of fake versus real news, because the news is actually intended to be the truth. The media has been given the responsibility to bring the truth to the people. Okay, so that's what we're really looking for, is the truth. Now we've got to ask ourselves, how do we find the truth? Well,
that is the question, especially when we now all have an ability to do what the television and radio stations do. Now we can create media in this giant overwhelm. Please
absolutely. So this is why, because of the breadth and the availability of news that we have today, it's even more important than it was in the past that we hold to certain truths. And one of those truths is that we have the ability to use logic and reason as human beings to decipher, to weigh different perspectives in order to find the truth. Okay, now there's a term given to that, and it's called to deliberate. And the so-called founding fathers of the United States, they used deliberation as a major tool for coming up with laws within the justice system. Now, when we hear the word justice system, let's break that word down into just is. So the justice system and the judges within that system, their job is to find what is just. Okay? So what is just is what is true. These are synonyms. Now there's some additional words that we need to bring into this conversation, and words that have been, I believe, intentionally removed from our vocabulary, or maybe not removed, but given a different definition than their true semantics. And quickly, to define semantics would be the science of the meaning of words. Okay, the science or study of the meaning of words. So this is an important thing, that we know what are semantics, if we are to sit and deliberate looking for the truth.
So to me, deliberate means look at the words and their, you say, semantic derivation, where they come from, and try to discern. I don't know how to put it exactly, but how does one do it unless one has enough knowledge to be able to make a decision? I mean, deliberating over partial facts, or not knowing where truth is. I mean, that's the part that I find most difficult.
Well, it's problematic if you start not using the whole truth. So we've got to look at the whole truth, not just part of the truth.
Sure.
And to do so is logical. And there's a term called prudence that we need to also bring into the conversation. To be prudent is to be logical and reasonable in one's deliberation. And it also is a slow and non-emotional conversation. That's what deliberation is to me. It's, we are going to sit down, we're going to put our egos aside, we're going to put our emotions aside, and we are going to align ourselves with certain things. Now, it is important that we align ourselves with these certain things that we need to outline, and I'll outline those as the laws, orders, and principles of absolute nature. Okay, I want to say that again real quick.
Well, I'm hearing it.
The laws, orders, and principles of absolute nature are what we, people and human beings, are to fashion ourselves after.
What is absolute nature?
Absolute nature would be all of creation. Everything around us, including physical and non-physical. Absolute nature would be a capital N, nature. Mother Nature, some people call it. The universe. Consciousness.
I don't know if maybe this is a prejudice. I don't know if everyone is equipped with the capacity to analyze and be prudent and deliberate about absolute nature.
Yeah, and you're right. You're right, Jason. Not everyone is. Those that are have been given the proper education or information to do so. In other words, if someone does not know what certain or know of certain orders of nature, then they are unequipped to deliberate on what is just in nature.
But I mean, I don't want to say I'm old, but I'm older. And, you know, before there was always lots of media, but now it is so overwhelming, and I see young people that grow up, and I know it sounds crazy, maybe have read a few books in their lives, but mostly they're on their phones and their tablets and their computers, and one story and another story and another story, you can look at them and consider them, but how do you know where the truth is? I mean, I don't know how to do that. I'm thinking that it's becoming... I've heard, by example, a father his father was in concentration camp, Second World War, Jewish guy. And when his grandson says, oh, there was no Holocaust, you know, and then you find these chasms between people because, you know, how do you evaluate what is the truth?
Great question, Jason. You are talking about a chasm that lies between generations.
Yeah.
And that, my friend, is what I see that we need to build a bridge over. We need to work together, and when I say we, I'm talking about all human beings on this earth and the unborn, because there are, just as I said, this is not only my life, and what I do does not only impact me, it impacts all those around me to some degree. And so my children will have children, and what I do today will impact my unborn grandchildren. And so when I say we need to do this, I'm talking about all the living and those yet to be born. We have got to build a bridge over that chasm that you're talking about. It is not enough to say that we're on different pages. It is not enough to say that the generation millennials have slidden off the track and now humanity's going to hell in a handbasket, because that is not going to help those who are not born yet. And what I mean by that is, Jason, the older generation, the dying generation, which is we're looking at is the baby boomer generation. They need to look to the unborn generation and realize that what they do in their last days impacts greatly the unborn generation.
Well, you know, I don't know if we can come to the bottom of a real solution that we can all agree on, but
we can, absolutely.
I go to Maui Community College, and I encourage other, I guess I can call myself seniors, people that are sort of like off the main track already. They've been told that they're at retirement age. That's a funny thing to say in this new day and age. But when I go to the school, I'm hoping to be, I want to call myself a brick and mortar guy, where the kids are they may not have as much exposure to older Americans, and I figure it's really good for them to see someone like myself and all the other seniors who can be, hopefully, that chasm eliminator, if you will, to build a bridge, to have the old come there and help mentor the young and share with them different ways and different aspects of looking at things and solving problems to try to bridge that gap. I almost feel like the older generation, if we die without passing the baton, or, you know, we are doing a great disservice to the world. So that's like what this show is about. I want to be able to get everyone here speaking. And we're not in deliberation here as much as we're in trying to come to all sides of things and put all the possibilities out there and see what we agree on, because I think that we may come to terms with that a lot of the things that we're talking about, we can commonly agree on the most important core of this and move forward to progress the world. And that may be idealistic in its goal, but I don't know any other way to do this. I don't see any. There is no absolute in anything, except you talk about absolute. I forgot the word you used about nature.
Absolute nature.
Absolute nature. It's a hard thing to define. We all of us perceive things from our own perspective. It's an interesting transition. I'm sure the whole world is obviously going through this, and suddenly seeing this huge difference. I've met a lot of younger people who are positive about the future, but have no way they can see to draw the dots to get to that future that they envision.
Good analogy there, Jason. And I think you're hitting the nail square on the head. And I agree with you. There are enough things that we have in common, all people, that we have in common, that these differences that we sometimes find ourselves focusing on are not as important as the things that we have in common. One of the things that we have in common is that we are all in this space together. We are all in this world together. These imaginary lines of countries and states and counties and cities are nothing but that. They are imaginary lines. We all breathe the same air. The air that I breathe into my lungs has parts of water in it that have been on the other side of the earth and have been breathed by people for thousands of years. We are all in this room, so to speak, together. And because we all find ourselves in this room or in this creation or in this reality together, we all have a responsibility in what it looks like. Okay? We, the older generation, have a responsibility what this earth and what our reality looks like as much as the younger generation.
Do you have, or I guess I'm asking a question, sort of a how-to question.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do we do that? How do we do that?
Do we have some time before we go to break?
We have a couple of minutes before we go to break.
How do we do that?
In other words, that to me is, go ahead, and then I'll.
How do we do that?
Back.
Let's look at an analogy. Let's imagine there is a automobile. In the front seat, you're driving. And in the passenger seat sits me. And in the back seat sits my kid and her daughter. Okay? In a car seat. And maybe that daughter's not yet born.
That's fine.
But there's 4 generations in this car. Okay? Me as a representative for the millennials and Generation X. You as a representative for the baby boomers. My daughter are in the back seat as a representative of the Generation Z. Okay? Z
That's
is what they're calling them. At last. This is what this is how important it is. Okay? What needs to happen is for you who are driving need to trust that I, who am navigating, now have the tools and the ability and information to drive this car down the road.
Trust why?
Because I've paid attention long enough. Trust because my kid is in the back seat. Trust because I am old enough, meaning I have grown into a fully mature adult. I'm no longer an adolescent. And so the way absolute nature works is you move through infancy to adolescence to adult to death. Okay, that's an order of absolute nature. And so if we human beings are going to act in accordance with that order of nature, then there needs to be a passing of the baton, like you said. But that baton will not be passed unless it is a trust that where you put that baton in that hand, that they will grab that baton and they will run the race like you would run the race. And that is what we need to do.
That's I want to say a tall order. We're going to come back here and we're going to take some station identification and support from our sponsors. Thank you, sponsors. You're keeping this radio station alive here on the Voice of Maui. We're going to come back and pick this up because to me, the question is, how do you trust? Like I brought up that thing about the father who's the grandfather whose grandkid is saying that there were no concentration camps. There wasn't, and that didn't really happen. That kind of stuff. It's hard for that older person to trust that these guys get it when the information is coming out and there's, because there's no sensitivity to be able to evaluate what is truth. That's what I want to come back to. We're going to take a break for station identification, et cetera, et cetera.
On May 8th, Amanda Eller was last seen about 10 a.m. at Haiku Market. She was last seen wearing a white tank top with a light blue or green cross-back undergarment, dark blue capri yoga pants, black flip-flops, and her hair in a bun-like ponytail. If you have any information regarding Amanda Eller's disappearance, please call the police tip hotline at 808-244-6421.
The Neutral Zone, with me, Jason Schwartz, would like to thank Maui Arts and Music Association, Dreammakers Foundation of Maui, for their support. Since 1991, with hundreds of television shows and their MauiArtsandMusic.com website, they have championed self-sustainability on Maui. The Neutral Zone is heard live Mondays at 11 a.m. and replayed Saturday at 7 a.m. on KAKU 88.5 FM, the voice of Maui.
The 50s, the 60s, the 70s. Hi, this is Steve Summers welcoming you aboard the Oldies Time Machine right here on KAKU. Enjoy special features like the Diner Tune, the Motown Memory, the Doo-Wopper, and the Elvis Moment. Come on! Spend an hour inside the Oldies Time Machine, Sunday mornings at 1 and 10 a.m. right here on the Voice of Maui, KAKU.
Hi, I'm Vince Fodi, co-host of the Biscuits and Gravy Show. KAKU is a listener-supported station. This means that all of the great programs you hear, like mine, are supported by you as well as our underwriters. If you would like to help keep the Voice of Maui talking loud and clear, go to kakufm.org/donate today and give. And don't miss the Biscuits and Gravy Show, Wednesdays at 11 a.m. on 88.5 FM, the Voice of Gravy.
Good morning, Uglyville!
Every ugly doll is unique.
I'm Moxie.
Bobo.
Wade.
Those close to me call me Slick Dog.
Which is not his name.
And every child is, too.
He can be pretty lovable.
That's why when you travel, you should make sure your child is in the right seat for their age and size.
That sounds pretty great to me.
Keep them safe by visiting nhtsa.gov/the right seat.
Isn't that right, gibberish cat?
Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
We are back. This is Jason Schwartz at the Neutral Zone, 88.5 FM. I'm here with Beau Hawkes. I want to thank one more sponsor who I don't yet hear in the circuit of things, and that's David Bryan. David Bryan is my real brother. I was sharing to him what I was doing, and he said, "Can I be a sponsor? Is this something you can write off?" I said, "Yeah, you can." So just want to let all you know out there who want to be sponsors. If you like what we're talking about and what we're doing here, we all can use the support to keep this free voice open and available. No one is, quote, pulling my strings. Even if I had money, no one would be pulling my strings. But thank you, everyone. Beau, we were in the middle of conversation about older people and younger people, and everyone's in the car together, and now the old driver and navigator is now in the passenger seat, who's a generation, let's say, next generation. Yeah. And behind that is your next generation, and then the future generations yet to be born. But what I was talking about is the older American, you were saying, needs to trust the navigator, that they've grown to a point. So that's funny. And the navigator has to trust that he's getting good information from the oldster.
Right. This car represents our world that we live in. Mm-hmm. And the four people in the car represent the different generations in this world. And the significance of the fact that we're in a car with closed doors means we all have a responsibility to this car. This is our world. Okay, so the one can't say, I'm going to do something and I don't care what the rest of you think. Okay, that's not going to be.
The world is inside this container, this car.
Okay, so
and I can't do anything independently. If the guy in the back seat wants to make a left.
Now I've got to say something as to where this car is. Okay,
please.
This car is off the road, Jason. The car is off the road. We are no longer, as a world, as a society, as a people, we are no longer in the center going down the road, and that center of the road means safety and health. Okay? We find ourselves off in the burrow pit. Now, we may be still moving forward a little bit, but we're spinning out, we're stuck, and we have got to do something different than what we are doing right now. Okay? So if the older generation needs to find how to trust the younger generation and pass the baton, the older generation can look at the current state of affairs and know that we are not where we need to be. Now, they got to go one step further. They have to realize that as part of nature, as we grow older, all of our different functions in our body also start to show signs of age. Okay? Memory goes. Physical strength goes. Zest for life goes. This is a natural order of growing older in this world. Okay? So a prudent person would say, at some point, I have got to stop being the one that is in control of where this car's going. And I would be better to go in the back seat and pass on to my wisdom to the baby in the car seat.
Well,
because that's where the sponge is. The child.
You're talking in theoretical, like I was, okay, but in theoretical, we still haven't gotten. Maybe I would be better off sitting in the back seat and letting the younger.
Absolutely,
group,
you would.
But well, the question is,
it's not maybe.
We're still at that same place of how does that older generation feel comfortable in letting go of the wheel when we're off the road and in the ditch? You're thinking that that person that's driving is the way, but is it?
How did we get off the road?
Well, we got off the road because we defined this road as the limits of the way to go.
We got off road because the steering wheel did certain behavior.
But well, I'm really trying to say, but again, we're talking in theoretical. I keep getting back to the, and I don't know if it's.
It's not theoretical. It's not emotional.
How do we get to the fact that we have to have certain common things like we were way back when? How do you know what the truth is? The truth is the center of the road. But who's evaluating that? You know what I mean? Like,
look,
we're talking in theoretical.
Jason, we're not speaking theoretically. We're speaking philosophically.
Okay.
Okay? This isn't theory. This is really what's going on. We, as a society, are off-road, and I cannot begin to tell you how imperative it is that we make different choices right now. This isn't theory. This isn't up for discussion. We're off the road.
Well, again,
and unless we do something, if we did not interrupt me, I would really appreciate it.
Go ahead.
If we are not willing to change our behavior, we are not going to see different results. That is very simple. Einstein said that the definition of crazy is expecting different results by doing the same thing. Okay? So this is not theoretical that we need to change our behavior in order to change our reality. The reality is we're off the road. And I'll say it again, we're off the road and we need help.
And I hear you.
Okay, so here's how we're going to get off the road. We're going to say, who knows how to get off the road? In the car. The person driving, a prudent person, would say, look, I apparently have gotten us off the road. Does anyone know how to get us back on the road? Now, if anyone in the car says, yeah, I do, let me get behind the wheel and get us out of here, that's when the older generation could say, okay, thank God, because if we keep going where I'm driving us, the baby isn't going to get it, their mother isn't going to get it, and the navigator isn't going to get it, and it will be on the older generation's responsibility to why that car is off the side of the road. So if we need any motivation, any trust as to why we need to pass the baton right now, one only needs to turn on the TV.
The biggest challenge I have with this, it's all theoretical and it's all physical. A lot of the things that we talk about, like you determined we were off the road, and yet the next person can say, we're not off
I'm reporting that we're off the road. I'm observing and I'm reporting.
But again, you're yet another...
This is the problem with the thinking right now. This is a problem with the thinking right now.
How do we know the difference?
This is a problem with the thinking right now. Is that, and we've been trained like this. This has been going on for generations, Jason, and this has nothing to do personally with anyone. And I will say this to the older generation. I pray that you do not take things personally. I pray that you can look at it objectively and take a step back and realize we have got to do something. All the other people in this car do not have the ability just to check out in a few years like the older generation does.
Do you see that happening?
Do I see what happening?
You know, you're talking theoretical. We older generation, and I'm not older yet, we're talking about whoever is declaring themselves older. It's all a relative scale. But now, those things that we're talking about, if it's not commonly agreed, if someone else that's older thinks one way and the other person thinks another way, and we're looking and trying to prove it with words in some system, young or old, how do we, that's where this all began, this conversation of how do we know what's real and what's not real? How do we move this forward where we take, like you're saying, we're off the road. Do you think that the people that are in power that are telling you the road is going great are agreeing with you? They don't agree with you. Where does that power change happen? Happens in the voting. And yet younger people that are voting say, I don't know, I don't want to vote. Are the statistics going up? Are people getting involved? Do they know what they're getting involved with? How they're going to take over in a world that...
How do we convince the driver of the car to acknowledge that they have driven the car off the road? And it wasn't their fault. I will say, it's not the driver's fault that they drove off the road. It was the road signs. You see? It was the road signs.
So what do we do with that?
Well, first we're going to stop listening to those road signs that have shown us clearly that they will drive us off the road. Okay,
we're not the only car on this road. So
I'm gonna break it down for you. I'm gonna break it down for you.
Getting rid of a road or the road signs.
We do not
making the persons in the car even more responsible for the decision on which way the car's going. Right? They don't have any signs.
The road, the center of the road is truth. Okay, let's maintain the center of the road is truth. So that means if we've gotten off the road, off the center of the road, then that means we are at not truth. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah, again, I'm talking about in theory because...
And now, when you say theory, then I think of something that is not proven. Now, if I state something that is proven, that is in a philosophical... realm, that doesn't make it theoretical.
No, but it makes it theoretical in that its application in this physical world, if we don't have markers that show that the theoretical and the physical match up, it's hard to...
Theoretical has no place in the scientific method.
But our world is not working based on that.
Scientific method is what? Scientific method is based on observation. Okay? And deliberation is a form of the scientific method. Okay? To deliberate is to communicate with a goal in mind. that goal is truth. Okay?
No, but
now,
you got to
truth,
have the facts, right? And again, how
gotta
do we
have
know what
all
the
the
facts
facts.
are? And how do that's why I'm back
Okay,
to that thing.
so this
how
is
do
a
we know where the truth is?
We take one thing at a time and we look at it. We don't become overwhelmed with the whole reality of it. We can look at one thing and say, is this true or not? And if we're confused about what is true or not,
That's actually a call-in. Go ahead.
then we need to look to nature as our guidance. We need to look to the laws, orders, and principles of nature to guide us in finding the truth.
Someone's calling. Let's see if we can figure out how to get them up here with us. Let's see if I hit the right button. Hello, you're on the air, KAKU. Can you hear us? We're trying to hear you. Now? I'm not sure. Well, if you were trying to call in, either we got you or we don't have you. I'm not hearing you. Sorry about that. Well, my concern... I don't know how to turn this off. My concern, stuff that we're talking about really is, you and I are talking about what we can do to get better, but you're coming in to show me how to work the phones, I guess. That means it was on somehow. Okay, I may be going over the air. You know, you and I are talking about this, but now, when we leave this studio and someone's out there going, well, what were they talking about? How does that apply to the real world? Here we are in the real world. I'm going to take those theories of what we should do and transferring of the authority, no, transferring of the control of the driver. Here we have a mayor of Maui and a council, and we're moving forward in things in Maui. We got a real set of issues and problems, and is the younger generation, are we trusting a younger generation? Or it has nothing to do with age? Doesn't it usually come with experience or looking, like you say, looking at what went before and where we need to make changes?
Absolutely.
And those opinions come to be, we know absolute truth and absolute nature, but we don't necessarily how to define things in terms that everyone is on the same page with. So it's hard for me to understand how the old person, if you say to, for example, let's pick somebody, Kiani Rollins Fernandez. She's here and she's in the budget thing and she has ideas about what she wants the budget to be. And there on the other side, I'm going to call it another side, we have, say, on Mike Molina or Alice Lee or Yukile Sugimura, or, maybe there are differences in opinions and the mayor has different opinions. So how do we get all this out in the open and see how we can, you're talking about making a change, but I'm not really sure how we're going to trust each other and honor, where do we find and define that truth? That's really my big issue. And I don't know if we're going to have an answer here. But we're going
to find an answer, Jason. We are absolutely going to find a solution. Again, some of us don't get to just check out here in a few years.
Check out meaning what? Die?
Yeah.
Well,
there's a whole generation that gets to check out, and I've talked to them, representatives of them. This is a kind of a blanket feedback I've gotten. It's not for everybody, from everybody, but they say, you know what, I'm sure glad I get to die and I don't have to sit around here and deal with all this. I'm sure glad I get to die. I hear that a lot. And you know what, Jason? I don't get to die.
Right. And
I don't get to just die.
Neither does someone like myself. I mean,
and I'm speaking,
I watch and I see that attitude that you were saying about people that, they're glad they're not going to be here to see what's coming, right? That's, what do we call it?
That's
blindness.
The old F it, it's not mine attitude. Not my job attitude is what it is. And that is an attitude that we have been, let me back up. Go back to the car that's off the side of the road. Okay. It's been following signs, road signs that have gotten it off the road. One of these road signs is saying, you are only responsible to yourself, and you are separate than everybody else. In other words, the road signs have divided us. And through that division, they have created unrest between us. Okay? The so-called founding fathers of the United States said there shall be no factions in government. Factions meaning parties. Why would they say that? Well, it's very simple. The government's job is to find truth, and there is only truth, so how could there be two sides of a truth? The justice system is based on finding and locating what is just. There isn't a red team for what's just, and there isn't a blue team for what's just. There isn't a liberal just, and there isn't a conservative just. But the media, they have divided us into these groups.
And who has dictated what is just? We can talk about theoretical, but
it's not theoretical.
It's all
who
being
dictates who's just? What is just? What is just?
I mean, people in the court system, you think that many of them feel like justice was served? That they got all the... I mean, there are people... I could talk specifics, but there are people that have told me in the court systems they never were allowed to introduce certain things as evidence that they felt were critical to getting that truth.
Do you believe me we're off the road yet? If the Justice Department...
If I'm still breathing and you're still breathing, we're on a good road.
We're not where we need to be. If you're telling me that the justice system is not serving up justice, that is evidence that we are off the road.
I am saying that the justice system being just is only an opinion because of an inability to find out what is truth. Truth has been created by society, like you said. They're making up signs. This is the way you go.
If you want to keep holding to the ideology that truth is subjective,
no,
meaning
truth isn't subjective.
That one person's
evaluation of the truth.
Okay.
Is
well, the
subjective.
reason why the law system has arguments back and forth is because the judge is to listen to the arguments for what is just. And if somebody shows through a natural order or a principle of nature that this is the case, then the other attorney, for example, cannot say anything in rebuttal, then we have arrived at the truth. That's kind of how the justice system is supposed to work. You're supposed to look at all the truth.
That was a very well stated. Supposed to work.
Okay, so the fact that it's not working the way it's designed to work, or that's supposed to work, then that's, again, evidence that we're off the road, off the side of the road. Okay? At a certain point, we've got to have a collective agreement that we are not where we want to be. As a people, as a society, collectively.
How do we do that? Well, I mean, I'm only asking, I know the answer is, you say maybe we can define it and figure out how to do it. Not everyone is listening to us and saying these guys are talking truth. There's lots of opinions that have their own interests. We've learned to be separate. We learned to think that we're not serving everyone. We're serving this faction or that faction.
Can I interject here? And I want to talk about the right of free speech. I hear people talk about, oh, you have a right of free speech, right of free speech. What does the right of free speech actually mean? I believe that it means you have the right to speak truth. You have the right to speak truth, even if it's against your own government. Now, that does not mean you can speak untruth. You see, we've been given a twisted narrative by the media as to what free speech means.
So how do we solve it? I mean, we can give...
Well, number one, we have to realize that free speech doesn't mean you are free to speak anything in any way you want.
It's not?
No, it is not, because the entire government is preempted by, it must be in accordance with nature. Now,
preempted by whom? I mean, the enforceability of those high,
Okay, how is it
lofty
preempted by it?
concepts
It's
are hard to
preempted.
do.
It's preempted by the fact that the government's job is to protect the people's, especially their inalienable rights, which are rights that cannot be taken away. In the Declaration of Independence, they talk about life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Okay, so let's talk about those three words: life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness talks about abundance. Okay, life is, they're not talking about death. They're talking about growth. They're talking about living. Happiness, we're talking about growth. We're talking about living. Okay, so all the government's job is to protect the ability of the people to do.
Do you see that happening now?
No, it's not happening right now.
Okay, so now I'm going back to, now we're getting out of the theory, now here we are.
Okay.
And now we're here on Earth, now we are. So I'm just doing this on purpose. I'm trying to take it from I call it the theoretical. You and I can talk about
conceptual.
And then,
can we say conceptual? Because
if you're in an ivory tower, we're not the ones moving the dials right now. Maybe that's what you were trying to do at running for mayor, right? You want to be the one with the hand in the car, driving the car. You're looking to switch that generation. So what is it that's going to get enough people to see that and help make those changes? I call them theoretical.
Conceptual.
Yeah.
Is a good word. Conceptual, because they're in the concept realm.
So how do we do that?
Great question. I think I know it. I think I know what you're asking.
I have you here because you're radical, you're progressive in your thinking, you're outside the lines and the lines of that road, and we're trying to decide, well, if we're on the road, off the road. Obviously, you don't think things are on the road. How do we get?
Okay, great. I want to quote one of my favorite visionaries, Buckminster Fuller.
Okay.
Okay, he invented the geodesic dome, like the Epcot Center.
Fuller, a lot of people probably know. Yeah.
Especially the older generation knows Bucky because he lectured through the better part of the 20th century. Into his 80s he lectured. And one of his most memorable quotes is, "To replace an old system, create a new that renders the old obsolete." And I take that as a directive from Bucky to say, if you want to have the out with the old, you got to build something to replace it with. See, it's not just enough for, and that's where.
So that's why I'm asking the question.
So,
what is that building mechanism?
Okay,
how are you going to be able to impact what we're talking about here?
This is a big project, and it requires big thinking, and it requires putting aside limiting beliefs. Okay, as we grow in and experience existence, we start collecting beliefs, and a lot of times these beliefs start to limit us. Okay.
Sure.
Now, it's not bad to collect beliefs, but it can be helpful to not hold on to those beliefs if they're going to limit you, especially when we're talking about creating something new. Okay, like this. So what we need to do is we need to create a new government. We need to create a new. If I could just.
Just so you'll know, we only got a couple of minutes left, so keep your answer in the little box.
By a new government, I say we need new laws. Okay, I've said it many times that it is the duty of the people to disobey unjust laws. Now, why would we disobey them? Because we don't want them. So in a new government, we only write the laws that we want. And we're only going to write laws that are just and that promote our life, liberty, and happiness.
Again, I appreciate your I call it theoretical, because in what you just said,
conceptual.
It's conceptual.
So here's what we need.
Because we have to now bring it into a system. We just talked about how the justice system, and you said, well, justice, courts, you mean that you don't think the courts are just? All these things that we're talking about need so much change. I'd like to get through this mist. We got about a minute going on. So how do we drop all the veils and the separateness and realize we're all one, and that we should be doing this for a higher cause that serves all of us and humanity?
Absolutely.
So
Jason.
The how-to, I guess, we all have different ideas of that how-to, but it's important to keep our minds open and, like you said, do it in a non-combative way, but really radically change the way things
I want
are.
to say something that's
You got
radical.
about 30 seconds. We're going to be leaving you in 30 seconds.
It would be radical if there was a set of 10 agreements that 8 billion people on this earth agreed to. Cut out all the BS, just the stuff that is important to all of us. I know that we can come up with a list of 10 things that we can all agree on, and
We
that
are
is
going to
new
be
law.
leaving you. This is Beau Hawkes here with me, Jason
Thanks, Jason.
Schwartz at the Neutral Zone. We want to leave the lines open for you to comment. Go up to our MauiNeutralZone.com website for comments. You can contact Beau Hawkes as well and me. It's a pleasure having you here today. Thank you for joining us. We are signing out here from the Neutral Zone. Aloha, everyone.
Aloha.